Time Walk with Me.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Time Walk with me. Today we'll be looking at my Queza Augur of Agonies EDH deck. Every card I show you will be the version that I actually have in the deck, unless it's an absurdly expensive card, in which case I'll tell you that the one I'm using is a proxy or a fake. If you don't like fakes, even when the user is upfront about it during the Rule Zero conversation, then we will not get along. Go hang out with your rich friends, I guess. First up is Queza, or Queza, Augur of Agonies. He is a 3/4 legendary Cephalid advisor who costs 1 generic and a white, a black, and a blue mana. He has a triggered ability that says whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So guess what we'll be doing a lot of in this deck? Whirlpool Rider. This is a mulligan on a creature. If you have a lot of cards in your hand, you can do some damage. Vilis, Broker of Blood. I actually took apart a deck with this guy as the commander so I could use it in this deck. Whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards, then you gain that life back again with Queza and hurt somebody. Its mana cost is very steep, but that's what ramp is for. Library of Lat Nam. This gives an opponent an agonizing choice, and you can do some political trickery to make sure they make the right one. Search the premises. If somebody attacks you, you get a clue. You can then sacrifice those clues to draw cards. Kaya, Intangible Slayer. This lady can do some cool stuff, including make you draw cards. If your commander isn't out, your opponents might not even mind her existing. They probably will though, since she can also hurt everyone. Teferi's Puzzle Box. This is one of my favorite cards. It's perfect for when you need a lot of draw triggers. It also screws up your opponent's plans. Also yours a little bit, but your main plan is going to be drawing lots of cards. Shadowheart, Dark Justicar. If a creature is about to die, you can use this to draw some cards. Kaito Shizuki, or Kaito Shizuki. He helps you draw, and he might even help you get Vilis out for free. Shakedown Heavy. He's big and cheap, and he might help you draw cards. Isperia, Supreme Judge. This guy is a decent attack deterrent all by itself, but with Queza out, he's even better. Fascination. Cards like this are nice because they work for different circumstances. Maybe it's an advantage for you to mill everyone. Maybe it's okay if everyone draws. Peer into the Abyss. You might end up gaining more life than you lose from this card, and you'll probably take somebody out too. Rankle, Master of Pranks. Here's another versatile card. If you can get a flyer through on somebody, everybody suffers unless you choose the draw option. Then it's everybody but you. Invoke Despair. If you can muster the black mana to pay for this, someone is in big trouble. How many planeswalkers will a person likely even have out at any given time? It can't be many. Greed. Queza takes some of the sting out of this card, leaving you free to fill up your hand and empty an opponent's life points. Transmogrant's Crown. It's not as good as Skullclamp, but it's still a good card. Your opponents will be slightly more hesitant to attack or block if doing so will give you a card and a life and hurt them even more. Skullclamp. This card is exactly as good as Skullclamp. It kills small creatures and makes you draw cards. Evolve Sleeper. This creature requires a little bit of investment, but once it's a Phyrexian, you can pay 3 mana to draw a card and gain a life whenever you can afford to. Howling Mine. Shouldn't a mine create treasure tokens? Of course, treasure tokens didn't exist when this card was first printed, but I don't see how they decided that thoughts or ideas could be mined. Maybe the howls are ideas that every player hears during their upkeep. However it's supposed to work logically, this is a nice group huggy card that your opponents won't likely want to destroy unless they really just hate losing 1 life during your upkeep. Well of Lost Dreams. Whenever you draw a card, this card becomes pay X mana, draw X cards, gain X life, and distribute X life loss among your opponents. Pore Over the Pages. If you have 5 mana available, you essentially pay 3 mana to draw 3 cards. You have to discard 1, but 3 mana for 2 cards isn't a bad rate. There's the selection aspect, which is one of Blue's best features, and you end up with card advantage. Plus, it triggers Queza 3 times. Frantic Search. This is basically free card selection. It's great if you have 2 cards in your hand that you can't or don't want to use, like lands in the very late game or overly expensive cards in the early game. Lich's Mastery. If Queza is out, this card makes you draw your whole deck and blast people in the face. You probably won't take out more than 2 people with this, but you can probably find a way to win with your whole library in your hand. Necrologia. This card lets you draw as many cards as you want for 5 mana. Wizards forgot to ban it when they banned Yawgmoth's Bargain, but don't tell them about it. Diabolic Intent. It's Demonic Tutor with a sacrifice requirement. In subdecks, that's an upside. In this deck, it's a sacrifice I'll probably be willing to make, especially with creatures out that I only cast for their ETB triggers. Grim Tutor. 3 life is a very small price to pay for any card in your deck. Diabolic Tutor. 4 mana is a very small price to pay for any card in your deck. Varagoth Bloodsky Sire. Whenever this guy attacks, you can cast a Demonic Tutor, and your opponent might not want to risk losing anything big enough to kill him, so it's potentially repeatable. But even if it does go off just once, it's worth it to get whatever card you need, plus get rid of a problem creature. Enlightened Tutor. Many of the best cards in this deck are artifacts and enchantments, so this is a very helpful card in this deck. Charcoal Diamond, Marble Diamond, Felwar Stone, Sisay's Ring, Commander Sphere, Relic of Legends, Dimir Keyrune, Darksteel Ingot, Soul Ring, Replicating Ring, Mind Stone, and Everflowing Chalice. Mana Rocks. Enough said. Dark Ritual. This is good for some of the cards in here with a lot of black mana pips in their cost. Pilgrim's Eye, Farfinder, and Solemn Simulacrum. These guys grab you lands, and they can be sacrificed later either as artifacts or as creatures. Not Farfinder though, he's just a creature. Shattered Seraph. This dude makes one of your lands super useful. Later, if you're desperate, you can cast it as a very expensive 4/4 flyer. Nykthos Paragon. If you use this on a Queza trigger, it will only ever give you 1 counter per turn, but that's still pretty good since every creature you control gets one. Vampire Scrivener, or Scrivener, one of those. This creature gets bigger when you gain or lose life, both of which will be happening a lot, sometimes even at the same time. It's really good with Necrologia, Lich's Mastery, Vilis, or Greed. Spellbook. This card is pretty essential to this deck, especially if you end up drawing your whole deck. Library of Leng. This card seems similar to Spellbook, but it's quite different. Many cards affect your hand size limit, and it can be confusing when more than one such card is out, but Library of Leng cuts through all that and makes you skip your discard step entirely. On top of that, your discards can't be random, and they can be to the top of your library instead of your graveyard. That's a lot of value in a 1-mana artifact. Onirophage. Or Onirophage? This guy loves it when you draw, getting bigger every time you do, and since it has flying, it can easily get hits in. Psychosis Crawler. Instead of just one opponent with each card draw, it hurts all of them. This is easily a game winner if it's out when you play cards like Necrologia, Lich's Mastery, or Vilis. Sensei's Divining Top. There is no deck out there that doesn't benefit from the deck manipulation ability of Sensei's Divining Top. Council of 4. Since drawing cards is the most powerful thing you can do in EDH, you can expect your opponents to include it in their strategies. This creature gives you benefits during your opponent's turns and punishes them for their otherwise sound strategies. Felden's Cane. Some of the cards in this deck make you draw a lot, and you might not always have a Spellbook or Library of Leng handy. This deck needs a Thought Vessel and a Reliquary Tower, which it doesn't at the moment. This card helps ensure that you won't deck yourself out. Sten, Paranoid Partisan. This guy makes some of your spells cheaper, and you can flicker him to change what kind of spell he affects, or to protect him. Blessing of Leeches. This card helps protect Queza, and the downside really doesn't matter because Queza gives you at least 1 life during your draw step. Teferi's Tutelage. As if making your opponents lose life wasn't bad enough, this card mills them whenever they draw. With Lich's Mastery and Queza out, this becomes a very annoying win condition. Voidrend. This versatile bit of spot removal is certain to come in handy at some point in the game. Street Wraith. If you need a 3/4 creature with Swamp Walk, here you go. But most likely you'll want to cycle it because it's basically free to cycle. Narset, Parter of Veils. When I got my first one of these in a pack, I saw so many terrible things I could do with it, I ordered a bunch more for other decks. It stops your opponents from drawing, and it gives you card selection and card advantage. Tivit, Seller of Secrets. This fellow is big, evasive, and hard to target, and he forces your opponents to either give you mana or card draw. He's pretty great. Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, or Liar, Disciple of the Drowned, not sure which one. This guy stops spells from being countered, which is fine in this deck because I don't run any counters in it. The flashback ability is pretty nice too. Test of Endurance. All you have to do is gain 10 life and you can win the game. Enchantments are harder to deal with in EDH than other permanent types, so there's a good chance this will win you the game. Rafine's Tower and Dromar's Cavern. They tap for whatever color of mana you need. They each have their downsides, but they're very handy. Exotic Orchard. Hopefully your opponents will have some versatile lands out too. Remote Isle. It's a land if you need it, and card draw for 2 if you don't. Plains, Island, and Swamp. This deck has plains, islands, and swamps in proportion to the white, blue, and black pips in the mana costs of the spells in the deck. I made an Excel spreadsheet to help me determine how many of each land to put in decks. Check out the link in the description if you want to download it for your own use. And that's it. That's all the cards in my Queza Augur of Agonies deck. Let me know what you think. I'll see you next time.